Hello and welcome to another episode of Fire 5 at Phoenix. I'm Zoe from Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching, and I am joined today by Fenella. Fenella is going to introduce herself in just a moment. So, Fire 5 at Phoenix, simple concept. We have a topic each month. So 1st of February today, so brand new topic. And a guest comes in with 5 questions that I haven't seen before. And we will see what answers I give and where that conversation leads. So, Fenella, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do.
Okay, thanks Zoe, thanks for having me. Hi everybody, my name's Fenella, as Zoe has already said, and I am a neuro-linguistic programming trainer. I train people in NLP and I also train them in hypnotherapy and something called timeline therapy, while I'm also use that in my coaching with individual clients. So basically I support people to communicate with themselves and with each other better to be able to get really successful results in life. That's essentially it. I won't go any more detail than that, but basically get out of their own way, clear the crap that's holding them back. That's what I like to say.
And this is such a great topic and I was really pleased that you could make it this month to come in on this topic, because the topic this month is our belief system. So how the beliefs that we hold, where those come from, how they either limit us, how they can liberate us, and how they can launch us forward. So certainly with NLP. So for those of you who don't know, I'm an NLP master practitioner. So I didn't do my training with Fenella because we hadn't met at that point. But whenever we do meet, we always have lots in common and lots of things to talk about in terms of NLP and how it's just such a powerful tool, the powerful tools and techniques that NLP has. So I'm really pleased. This is such a great topic for the two of us to have some questions on. So with that being said, do you want to go ahead with the first question?
So my first question is, why do humans have belief? Why do they believe, do you think?
Oh gosh, going in with a big question. Why do humans have their belief system? And I think it's really interesting from my perspective, as it wasn't really something that I gave a huge amount of thought about until I started in the world of self-development training and being more conscious of who we are and what we think, and how that can really impact what we believe, and then how that can then impact how we behave and things that we do. And then from that self-development world to go into the NLP courses and see how powerful the thoughts that we have can really influence so much of our world. So I think with our beliefs system, it's, there is, I think that quite a lot of it is the early days of how we learn and who we learn from and what influences that world. So our parents, our family, schools, teachers, people of influence, and how they teach us what to believe, because sometimes it is a very outright, isn't it? This is what we believe and you will follow this belief. And then also those experiences of what we experience for ourselves, especially in those teenage years, and we start to question what other people are starting to tell us and what we see and how we see the world, and then how that starts to fit through that filter. And I think it's, from my perspective, I think it's really interesting that when we're in our younger days, we have people who challenge those beliefs a lot more. And when we get to adulthood, people don't challenge that quite as often. And I think at the moment, there's almost a reluctance maybe to challenge what people believe and where that's come from. And I think it's really important to be your own critical thinker and challenge what you believe, but also to have that curiosity with other people about what they believe and why they believe that and where that's come from and what experiences sit behind that. And I think there's a reluctance to do that. And I think that's a real shame, because I think we can learn from what other people believe and their experiences. And I don't think we do that as much as we could. Mm-hmm. Is that similar to what, if the question was reversed, is that similar to what you would say, or would you say something totally different?
So in terms of why we believe, is because for me the question is around why, what is this need for us to believe in something? And it is really, it's about us being able to kind of have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
To have kind of like something that can make our lives in a way. Humans love certainty, and beliefs are about, we believe something to be true, so we're certain about it, and it kind of enables us to frame how we move through life.
Yeah.
And as you say, exactly, as a lot of our beliefs are taken on when we're very young, and yeah, we're told, and I just know from my personal perspective, excuse me, is that it's something that I have always challenged. I've always been one of those people who's gone, who says it's like, who said? Just because you tell, who made that rule? So perhaps in that way, it's because I really challenged beliefs. I've found things to be a little bit maybe more uncertain in my life, and maybe I quite like uncertainty in some ways. I kind of got used to it. So I do think it's why we believe is because it's kind of like, it gives us something to hold on to. And because we got a clan then, haven't we? We belong to a group. Those people, they hold the same beliefs. So yeah, that's why I think we have beliefs. I don't really know beyond that. It's just the thing that pops into my head sometimes. Why do we have beliefs?
Yeah, it is such a great question. And I think it is. We do like to have something that we can hold on to, but also something that we can then identify in with other people, isn't it? Something that helps us to see that familiarity with other people. Oh, they think that too. So you gravitate towards people with shared beliefs. And I think that's really interesting because, like you, I've always, and I'll hold my hands up and say I've always been one that's been quite challenging of, well, why do we think that? Why do we believe that? Or why have we always done it that way? What else could there be? And I love to have conversations with people who think differently and who have a different set of beliefs, and to explore why they think differently. And I think it's really interesting how and what shapes them. But yeah, why it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
How did that evolve in human beings? Where did all of that start?
Come from? Yeah.
And is it because we have consciousness? We have more consciousness, or we can actually speak. Animals probably speak to each other as well. And I know that animals, personally, I believe animals have consciousness. But having that kind of discussion, that, like you say, is we can sit there and talk and understand where different beliefs come from. And that kind of, can I go into it kind of brought onto a second question, that people can hold such opposing beliefs. How do you think, maybe it's an extension of what you've already started talking about, the people within a group can hold such opposing beliefs? So how can we kind of get them to, understand, or bring people, what sort of questions can we ask, or if we were sitting there with them, to encourage them to maybe understand each other a bit more?
I think it's the curiosity for me, isn't it? I think when people enter into some of these conversations, it's almost that you can almost feel that defensiveness start to creep in, that people are going to try and change a belief. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? Beliefs are beliefs. They're not necessarily fact. They're not necessarily the truth. It might be our version of the truth, but it might not be the truth. And I think sometimes when we get into conversations with people, you can almost feel that defensiveness start to creep in and like you said, it's that something to hold on to, isn't it? And people don't want to change that belief because there's that worry that they will lose things with it, that change is possible. But I think you can sit and have a conversation and hear about somebody else's belief and try and understand somebody else's belief without it having to challenge and change your own. And I think sometimes people go into those conversations with this, I mean, social media is great for it, isn't it? Of, well, this is it, and they talk like it's fact, and it's not fact. It's an opinion, it's a belief, it's something that they might believe to be true, but that doesn't mean that somebody else can't believe that something different is true. And it's that, I don't know, is it ego, that need to be right, that need to know more, rather than that curiosity and openness and willingness to learn? It's, but you see it, don't you? And then it's like two goats banging heads because both are so kind of firm in what they believe is the truth, that they're not listening, they're not open to hearing that difference.
And do you have any kind of ways you find, or you've done with other people as an extension of this question, that has kind of got them to, you know, who they're opposing, you know, that in that position, that enable them to kind of just step back and be slightly less defensive?
When I did my coaching course last year, they asked us to come into the course with the mind of a beginner and the mind of someone who knew nothing and was willing to learn. And I thought that was such a great phrase. I mean, for me, it was great because it gave me permission to know nothing, which helped with that comfort zone of being in a space where you're trying to find you know, that nervousness around learning for me. So that was great because it gave me permission to not have the answers and to not know. But I think you could apply that in this kind of scenario of you might already have your own answers, but you're going in to listen to somebody else's answers, and that isn't necessarily going to impact your own. It might give you some intrigue and it might help you to learn something different, but it doesn't mean that it will change something for you. So I think it's that openness. And I love, you know, the term they use in NLP, that childlike wanton curiosity of what if it wasn't, what if it was something different, of what else could it be. I love that because that fulfills the why that I've got. And I think it's embracing that just because you're learning a different way or you're hearing something different, it doesn't mean that you don't know. It just means you've got an opportunity to learn extra.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's just kind of like really connected with me as well. It's that idea that actually there are many different flavors. It reminds me of an induction that I use. There's how many different flavors are there to reality? Yeah. So, you know, that curiosity and that possibility. Yeah, and it for me is how to, well, perhaps it can lead on to another question is, say I was somebody who'd never thought about my beliefs before and how they affect me. Where would you suggest I begin? What would you suggest I do?
That's such a big question, isn't it? Like, where do you start? Where do you begin with all of this? If it's because it's not that it's not there. It's just that you haven't given it space and time to really think about what it is or what they are and how they impact you. I mean, certainly from a coaching perspective, with clients in a conversation, they might say, well, this is it, or this is, and it's a very firm belief. And so that question of, oh, how do you know that? How what experiences have you had with that? Has there ever been a time when that hasn't happened? To get them to explore that, that belief and how true that belief still is. Because yes, it would have been true at one point. Is it still true now? But that starting point of, if you haven't ever sat down and looked at it and explored it, I think it's a very, very big question, and probably I would say has the potential to overwhelm of when you think about how many beliefs we all hold. So I think for me, it would be start with the ones that you feel hold you back and explore those, because they're the ones that if you can start to unpick those, or you can start to decide what you want to believe in instead, or what is true for you now, they will have the biggest impact. And that might lead to others coming to light that you can play about with. But I think start with the ones that you want to change or you want to explore. so many people haven't given, it's just not something that we don't look at it in schools or anything like that, do we? Look at religious beliefs, but we don't look at perception of the world, how we see the world and what influences it. We don't look at that set of beliefs. So it's not a skill that we learn. It's not a life skill that we learn, is it?
No, it's not. And it just reminds me of a question or conversation I had with someone recently when we were talking about, you know, changing those beliefs that don't work for us, that don't serve us anymore, and how perhaps a conscious way of doing it, people do it via flipping that belief, turning it on its head and making it an empowering one. And, you know, that kind of links into being in school, and we're always often still in this country taught to hide ourselves, hide our light underneath a bushel, you know, not to brag about how good we are about things. And so, you know, she said, well, doesn't that make me, you know, when I turn my negatives into positives and say, you know, I'm more than enough, I'm very capable, I'm really good at this, doesn't that make me sound big-headed? And that's kind of the thing that I've noticed is with some people, they're so used to looking at the other side, they don't even know that they're doing it. And then if you were to flip it, it's such a big step then. For them, they can't, you know, they feel like they're being arrogant, effectively.
Yeah,
it's an interesting concept for somebody, you know, who's never thought about their beliefs before and how they affect them.
and I think that's the thing with the flip, isn't it? Is that if the limiting belief is quite, you know, that end of the spectrum, to flip it completely can feel so different that it almost feels impossible for people to feel that I can go from that to that. So the conversation that I quite often have with people is, you know, if you believe this to be true, just to put it into a practical sense for people, is, you know, if you had a court case and you had to present all of the evidence of why this is true versus presenting all the evidence of when this hasn't been true or why this may not be true, how does that evidence back up? I mean, you know, it's I think sometimes it adds a bit more. People look at it a little bit more logically rather than emotionally when you say, what's the evidence? What's your evidence base behind this now? Not necessarily when you first believe this to be true, but right now, in the here and now, how confident are you that this is true? And how many occasions, if somebody came up and said, well, hang on a minute, what about this time? Because that didn't apply then, and what about this time? Could you stand there and wholeheartedly stand behind that belief and argue that it's true? Or do you already have some doubt in your mind of whether or not things have significantly changed that are starting to move you on, maybe more than you were even aware of? Because what we say and what we think and what we feel, because sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect there as well, isn't there? So just, sowing that seed of what else is it can... surprising, isn't it, once people start to talk it through and they're like, no, why do I still say this? I know this isn't true anymore, but I still say that it's true. I still hold that belief because I haven't noticeably, consciously challenged it.
So if I was somebody who'd never thought about it, about how my beliefs, it's like maybe start with one belief that's really not working with me, and then question the evidence around it. And seeing, you know, how many times that probably isn't true in other areas of my life, and then that would enable me to start, you know, possibly it's like a domino effect. Maybe you go, okay, well, when else am I doing that in my life? Do you find that happens with your clients? I love the expression around the domino effect of, okay, if we were to knock this one down, what else would fall with it? What else could this change? And it's surprising, isn't it, that, well, it's not surprising, but I think it becomes surprising if people realize how much it's holding back, that when you knock that first domino down, the confidence, the self-belief, the self-esteem, the willingness to step forward, that all that's hiding behind each of all of those dominoes that are behind that one. And if you can knock that one down,
what's behind it that you've got access to.
So what for you is the most important or the strongest belief that you hold?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, funny, isn't it, that we talk about this all of the time and then it's not necessarily something that springs to mind. There's so many. I think there are so many that I know that I draw on all of the time to help me move myself forward. And so there might not necessarily be but one, but certainly, conversations just this morning around, most decisions we make are not permanent. Make the best decision for you, knowing what you know right now. And if that changes, you can make another decision. And I think that's something that I've held on to, and have reminded myself of, this is not permanent. This is making a decision based on what I know now. That's the best decision for me, knowing what I know now. I think other beliefs, lots. I obviously have worked a lot on my own sort of limiting beliefs that I've had in the past of, certain things that I've hidden behind. I think they've held me back, and then I think sometimes they might have initially held me back, and then I've been quite happy for them to be there and not have to push that down, because I know what might sit in behind it. But I think lots of, the give it a go, say yes, see what opportunities are there. There's lots of things that I've done over the years. It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to pick one. Could you pick one?
I think a belief that can underpin all the other beliefs, which then makes it kind of quite vague, I suppose, because that's what I think about, some of the values. But is just simply believe in yourself. Believe, like you say, is believe I can do it.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental self-belief is, and again, that links into something else, isn't it? Is that everything will be okay. That links into your decision making.
Yeah.
Made this decision. So it's just, is everything will be okay.
Yeah.
That belief.
Which is so powerful when you think of how many things you could apply that to. I think one thing that has triggered a response in my mind of that I find myself reminding myself that I have everything that's needed to make this work out okay, which kind of combines those two that you've just said, I think. But it's that trust that, I've got enough experience, enough tools in the toolbox, enough resilience, positivity, determination. That's those internal resources to know that whatever happens, I will make it okay, or I will be okay with what happens. So I think that is that line, isn't it, of everything will be okay, but everything will be okay because I have the resources to make it okay, or because I have the mindset to be okay with what happens.
So you're the active agent. You're an active agent within it, as opposed to being passive.
Yeah.
Passively done too. Yeah.
But I've been that passive agent, and it's not somewhere where I plan to revisit. It's not a comfortable place to be. Not for me. I guess not for many people. But I've had life done to me. I much prefer being in the driving seat.
It's incredibly empowering when you realise that the same for me as well. It's when you realise that you have that capacity, that actually you are the agent in your life, and you can make life happen, as opposed to it just happening to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Just trying to think, because that's probably, I don't know how many questions I
wasn't counting, so I can't think and count at the same
Yeah.
time. That's goes a bit past my realms of capability.
So yeah, we've covered quite a lot of the questions that I've written down, because we've kind of like meandered on in a conversation.
No, I love that.
That cover them. Because I'm going to say to you, what other question I had was, what beliefs have you changed that had the most effect on your life?
Oh, I think what belief, I know where my change was. I know where my catalyst for that change was, what the disruption and chaos that created that change was the belief. I think the belief for me at that time was that there wasn't another way, that this was it, that this was the path, and that I had to trying to find the right words, that I had to walk the path that I had chosen, and that my choice had been made, which I think strangely fits in with that no decision is permanent, and that there's other options. So I think that probably was the turning point of the recognition or the acceptance that this was the path that I had chosen, but it didn't need to be the path that I stayed on, and that there were other options there. And again, that then created that it will be okay. I have the tools and resources to make it okay, or and while it's not okay, I have the resilience to be okay with it not being okay, and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for quite a long time this was the path that you've chosen, and so this is the path you need to walk. And so I think the change of belief was, you don't have to keep walking a path that is not the path you want to walk anymore.
Yeah, that kind of sort of, you just saying this is the path that you've chosen has reminded me, of conversations I've had with people who've through their life, again, this is, other people imposing or taking on other people's beliefs, but other people who maybe are influential in somebody's life, having a real, having quite a lot of power in terms of influencing how someone thinks.
Yeah.
And being told that actually this is the path, you've chosen your path. Now you have to, or you've made your bed, now you have to lie in it. And that's quite an incredible one, because it's not something that I've experienced, but just to imagine that being told that, and how then, how challenging it can be to actually believe that there is something out of there when you get so embedded in that life.
Yeah. And I think, reflecting on it now, there were other beliefs that were feeding into that. The belief that certain decisions should be permanent ones, the belief that, around commitment, or the belief around sticking with things and making things work. There were lots of other beliefs that all fed into this is the path you now need to, it might be a path that's cutting your feet up, but you need to walk it, and you need to find a way to make that path smoother, rather than take that path there that's already smooth. It was, I think for a long time, it was, this is the path, focus on trying to walk that path, rather than seeing that there were other paths that could be chosen. And I think once that catalyst for change came in, once that kind of disruption of and then seeing that there were other possibilities, that then changed some of the beliefs around that.
Because you mentioned a couple of things around, around commitment, the belief that we need to stick with things. Do you think, do you think there are certain beliefs that our culture or our society still really tries to instill in us and make us, and create situations almost, or that people live within.
I think it's around that. It's that belief of the being labelled a quitter, being labelled somebody who gives up too easily, rather than and I think that was part of the belief of am I giving up too easily? Am I quitting? Am I stepping out of something and I need to put more effort and energy into it? And I think that's a belief that we hear all the time in school, isn't it? Of oh, you don't give up so easily, and success is right around the corner, and you put the effort and the energy in, and it will all pay off, and trust the process, and success will happen. And so that creates a belief in itself, doesn't it, that if you keep working at it, things will change. That doesn't always apply. Sometimes you can put all of the work and all of the effort and the energy into it, and things don't change. So it's that knowing when to press the stop button and make a different decision. And I don't think that's something we learn. You don't hear people talk about that, do you? You hear about that, or you need to be more resilient, you need to be more persevering, you need to be you need to challenge yourself to push through, rather than you need to accept when things aren't working and that there are other options and you can make a different decision.
Yeah, and that was the best decision at the time, and now we can choose something different. But because it's something for me that I feel that there's contradictory information coming, and it can be very confusing for people. So something I come across is that change is hard. It takes a long time. The belief that it has to be a struggle to change, a struggle to make a different path in life. And I think that that's something that when I learned NLP changed. Well, actually, I did quantum healing before.
Right.
And I remember being told by I was sitting there saying, "Oh, but it's so hard." And the woman said to me, she said, "It's as hard or as easy as you make it. It's a decision that you make in your head, or it's a belief that you choose to hold." And that's always stuck in my mind ever since then, because when I was younger, it was, well, again, the who says. But I started to really take it on, because that's what I was told. That's what was around me all the time. That I wanted change, but people would say change takes a long time. Change is really hard. And for me, I'd be saying, well, if we keep saying that, of course it's going to be. That belief is going to be embedded within our culture or our psyche, or we're gonna inherit that belief. So yeah, there's a few beliefs I get quite triggered by, to be quite honest.
I think if you make change hard, if you create the belief that change is hard, then we're getting into all kinds of discussions here now, but you potentially if you stop people from changing, you hold them in the space where they are. And if that benefits you, you don't want people to change, you don't want people to see that something else is different, that there are other possibilities, then that societal message of change is hard, this is hard, this takes, have you got what it takes to do this? If you start this, then you have to continue this path, and you've made that commitment, and that's the path that you have to walk. If you put people in fear of change, then it holds people in the space that they're in, and that works for some people. So some people don't want to make change easy for other people, but yeah, exactly, change is what you make of it. And I think if you have a compelling purpose to change, and you can see and you can understand, and you have that belief that if you can change the way that you think and the way that you feel now, that things will be different, things that will be better for you, then why it makes it so much easier to flip the switch, doesn't it? Well, I don't think that anymore, because I don't want to. When I think that, I feel this, and I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to think this instead. And just being able to change it around and play with it does make all the difference.
So it's kind of being able to give someone a way of identifying that compelling thing.
Yeah.
To give value to the change effectively.
Yeah, and I know we've had conversations, haven't we, around.
Sorry, somebody seems to be trying to just keep talking. My phone all over the place.
Somebody has the belief that they are important enough to have your attention. But I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? I'm lost my train of thought.
I'm really sorry about that.
No, don't worry at all. I'm one of the first ones we did. I completely lost internet access, and my poor guest Dan was just sat there waiting for me to reconnect and reappear. So don't worry at all. I think it's just, I know we've talked about goals and how we help people through setting their goals, and how we help them to see that visualization of what success looks like, what's different, how will they think differently, how will they speak differently, how will they feel differently, and part of that, and when I'm working through that with people, is identifying what that compelling purpose is, so that when when you do this, this is what happens, and when this happens, this is what happens, and when this happens, this is what happens, and being able to see all of the consequences of those actions to help really define that compelling purpose, so that when change feels hard, they see all of the possibilities and see it as a challenge, and moving out of a familiar comfort zone. I think comfort zones aren't always comfortable, are they? They're familiar, not always comfortable, but being able to move out of that into something different, and to see the opportunities and see it as a positive rather than a change being a negative. And so I love disruption. I love a little bit of chaos, and I love because it makes you stop and think, doesn't it? It makes you stop and think things differently. Look at the disruption that we've all experienced in the last 18 months. It's not been comfortable because of the uncertainty, but look at some of the amazing things that people have done, or the way people have seen the world differently, and changes that they've made that now makes life feel better for them as a result.
Yeah. And in terms of, I think over the last year, it's kind of shown people actually how fast it can happen. And whilst, yes, it might not be comfortable, that realizing that, the life before necessarily wasn't that, it was familiar, as you say, but not comfortable. It was habitual. But I was thinking is that so when you sort of set the goals with your clients, and when you're working with them, it's that, so each time they take a step, their belief becomes a bit stronger.
Yeah.
And they believe a bit more about the possibility of being able to have what they want to have.
Yeah. I know one of my favorite questions is, what do you need to let go of to let that happen? What do you need to let go of and leave behind for you to move forward, and what permission do you need to give yourself to do to move yourself forward? And I think that they're very simple questions, but I think asked in the right time and the right space is just that disrupting that pattern of thought of I can only do this, I can't talk about myself in a positive way because it's bragging and it looks negative. Giving yourself permission to be proud of your achievements and talk about them and share them. Leaving behind the belief that looks a certain way to certain people, and it shouldn't be done.
All the rules.
All the rules that nobody knows where they came from.
Yeah, so the rules that create beliefs.
Yeah.
Or the beliefs that create rules.
Yeah, that's definitely a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? What came first? And it's interesting, isn't it, when you look at the world and how the world is, of who decided that would be beneficial. But
and I think that connects back into what you said about the change thing around changing our beliefs. It's some people don't want us to change our beliefs because it serves a particular perspective in terms of getting people to live their lives in a certain way, or perhaps we could go into the education system, which is my my big thing around instilling beliefs. But what does that do for the potential of children in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, no, if you feed or sow this seed that a child like you doesn't get a job like this, or this is the path that people like you take, this is where your expectations should be, that's hugely impactful at that age, rather than sowing the seed of possibility and sowing the seed of what could happen. I think, yeah, there's such powerful conversations, but I'm not sure people are always as aware of the impact that can have. And so often, I don't know if you find this when you speak to people, but the belief, when you ask them where do you remember where that belief came from, they can't remember how far back it goes. They just remember that always thinking that way.
Yeah, like somebody saying, I've always the belief that I've always been a warrior.
Yeah.
That's just, and it becomes effectively, the beliefs become part of the personality, and that's just the way that I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I probably couldn't say where some of my beliefs came from, actually, to be honest.
But I think I think from my perspective, there's almost a belief that people think they need to know where it's come from to be able to change it. And sometimes it's that acceptance mindset, isn't it? Of you can accept that that's maybe an answer you will never have, but that doesn't mean that you can't change. That doesn't mean that you can't change it and choose to think in a different way.
Yeah, that's kind of what I say to people that I work with, is that, we're the sum of all our beliefs and decisions that we've made in our life. We are where we are. Now it's up to us where we decide we want to, or where we believe we can go in future. Yeah. It doesn't matter about any of that. There's absolutely no judgment behind it. It's there's everything there's always everything to play for, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What incredible questions. I lost count, so I wasn't counting to lose count, actually, so I don't know whether you asked 5 or not. Does it feel like you asked 5?
I think I probably asked a few more, because as the conversation unfolds,
but that's exactly how I wanted, and that's exactly how I wanted these to be. I want them to be, the questions means that you bring topics into the conversation that are of interest to you, but where the conversation goes after that is, I enjoy every single one of these. But thank you so much for your time in coming on. We'll find out how many questions you ask when I type it up. But it's okay. You won't be the first to have sneaked a couple of extra, and I'm sure you won't be the last. But this will go out across all of the different platforms. We will tag you in so people can come and find you. I absolutely do recommend NLP training. Check out Fenella's courses. You don't need to be a coach to do NLP. NLP has huge benefits across so many different areas. And I know when I did the first practitioner course, I went as a coach to develop, and learn, but it was a huge personal journey for me. So you don't need to be a coach to do NLP. It will benefit every area of your life. So do check it out. We will tag you in. Please like and subscribe, wherever you are watching or listening. Hit the notification button so you get those notifications to let you know when we're going live. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Fenella, for your time, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.